Peggy has become one of the most beloved characters in Mad Men, and seeing why is not particularly challenging. You have someone like Roger, who is misogynistic, who is elitist, who is constantly forcing others to do his work while he relishes all the inherited privilege he has from his father being one of the founders of Sterling Cooper. Even someone like Dawn, who is more sympathetic and who has had to work harder and more creatively to reach his current position, is not a great person. I think it is too easy to throw Dawn into a category with other similarly immoral anti-heroes from around the same era, such as Walter White or Tony Soprano. Dawn doesn't quite fit into that category, not simply because he's not a murderer, but because he is capable of connection, he is capable of understanding others, and he wants to. He is desperate for a true and oceanic sense of connection and communion. That his worst qualities, his greed, his arrogance, his, above all, desire for a simplistic and superficially satisfying idea of resolution, prevent him from getting to that point of true connection is a tragedy. It's not poetic justice in any cathartic sense. Yet Peggy is quite different. Peggy is the most ostensibly heroic character in Mad Men. Peggy is a young and naive newcomer. She is not tarnished by the machinations of Sterling Cooper. She is not quite a part of this world. She is on the outside because she's a woman, because she's young, because she's of a different generation. And she does not entirely become a part of that old system, but is a part of a generation of change, a generation of transformation. Peggy, had she lived 20 years ago, would not have been able to rise to the level of being a high creative executive in the advertising industry as she becomes by the end of the series. Yet, Peggy is not simply a heroine. She is not this moral and just character purely that we can feel good about seeing on screen. And it is absolutely beneficial to the narrative that she is not just a simplistic moral character. She is a dual protagonist of the show. She is Dawn's mirror or foil. And fittingly, she has a lot of Dawn's faults. Dawn sees a lot of himself in Peggy. Superficially, they are quite different. Dawn is the image of the quote-unquote madman. He is slick, he is suave, he is handsome. He is the man everyone wants to be or sleep with. But that image is a lie, or at least it's incomplete. It's a construction he makes so he can be in this world, so he can succeed in this world. He never quite feels like he naturally fits in. He grew up poor. He's from the Midwest. He's not one of these guys. He's not like Roger. He's not even like Pete. And so he sees a bit of himself in the outsider, Peggy. What he means by that in a positive sense is that he sees in her his own ambition, his own drive, his own creativity, and his own willingness to work around the constraints of a pre-established system to try and attain some scrappy sense of personal and professional fulfillment. But while Peggy eventually breaks from Dawn in some of the most heartbreaking scenes of Mad Men, Peggy is more similar to Dawn than she would like to admit, and not in all of the good ways. She is a bit short-tempered and short-sighted. She can fly into bursts of rage and resentment. She can be quite selfish, and she is more than willing to ignore the interests of others to boost her own interest. She is fundamentally an individualist, in both the good and bad senses of that term. The good sense is that she is self-driven, self-committed. She's willing to try to attain a clear sense of her own identity, her own vision of what she can achieve in this world. But on the other hand, she also separates herself from others. She is a part of this broader swell of feminist thinking, and she certainly takes advantage of that in the positions it offers her, but she's also a bit distant from that. She is devoted to her own success and her own prosperity, as opposed to, say, the interest of all womankind. All of this may sound like I am extremely critical of Peggy. I am not. But I think these complexities are important to ascertain if we are to avoid falling into the narrow and reductive trap of thinking of Peggy merely as the good one, the moral heroine, braving this world of corrupt, selfish, materialistic men to achieve her own sense of personal fulfillment. I do believe quite a few people read the show like that. But I think that is as narrow of an idea as thinking that the show is merely extremely sexist because it depicts sexist behavior. Peggy is a hero in a way. She does have to work hard. She does demonstrate a lot of guile and creativity and commitment. And the show is happy for her. When she is sauntering out with that pornographic painting under her arm, that's a statement of power and authority. And the show likes her for that. And it gives her a good ending because it does like her. It thinks she deserves this sense of happiness, this sense of joy and contentment. But that does not mean the show endorses her wholeheartedly. And I think any mature and thoughtful analysis of this show needs to come to terms with the fact that it is not simply viewing Peggy Olson as this moral paragon. There is a particular incident that I love because it demonstrates Peggy's capriciousness, her pettiness, her sense of smoldering resentment that might not be as overt as Dawn's, but is still present. And that is in episode 702, where it's Valentine's Day, and there are flowers that Peggy believes are for her, but they're not. They're for her secretary, Shirley. And Shirley does not quite know how to state to Peggy, her intimidating boss, that the flowers are hers. And by the end of the episode, Peggy is embarrassed and bitter, and she lashes out against Shirley, even though Shirley has done basically nothing wrong. Peggy, like Dawn, is not simply petty for the sake of pettiness. This resentment that consumes both of them at times comes from a place of instability. It comes from a place of fundamental uncertainty regarding their personal identities and the struggles of integrating the different components of that identity into a holistic form, into something that is relatively harmonious. For Peggy, there is love and there is work and her career success. Now, a lesser show would have played this simply in the context of, oh, can women really have it all during this time? And there is some of that in Mad Men, but it's messier and more complicated than that. Peggy was raised by this traditional Catholic family. Her family wants her to get married, have kids, and work is temporary until you get married and have kids. That's the extent of the expectations she must fight through. And she does fight against those expectations. She reacts quite violently against them. But she also holds on to a lot of those values. Perhaps this is internalization, but it's a little more complicated than that. Because the whole idea of, oh, hey, Peggy is really this ardent, independent businesswoman, but she's internalized a lot of these traditional, conservative, family-centric ideas, posits a binary that I don't think the show really adheres to. Peggy is ardent about her career success. But she is not against love. She's not against kids in general. Her circumstances present a division that Peggy does not really want to exist. Peggy is pregnant in season 1, and she really can't be at this time. She has a kid, but then gives the kid away. She is not going to take care of a kid. She can't do that. And even throughout the rest of the show, she keeps coming into these opportunities where her commitment to work, her commitment to these professional successes is placed against personal relationships. People don't always want, in this time period, someone like Peggy, who is that committed to her work, who is not this housewife type. She's not Betty. Peggy is not the one making those divisions. Others are. Peggy is placed into a position where she is kind of set against romance and family and the like, even though she does not really want to be. She's placed into a position with her mom and that whole upbringing where she doesn't want to be a part of that, but she also does not feel that the image that others construct of her as this soulless, purely professional-focused person is really true. She's launched into these binaries that she does not want to endure. She wants to move past them, and she has difficulty doing that. She wants to react against her mom, against these men who don't really want someone who works like she does. But she does not want to have to react against that by going all the way to the other extreme and not caring about romance at all. And she ultimately is able to find a sense of personal success and happiness that unites her romantic life and her career life with Stan. And to a certain extent, this ending's a bit silly. It is very rom-com. It is an ending from another show, almost. That does not make it a bad ending, I want to stress that. I believe it works for Peggy, who has suffered a lot, who has constantly had to make these compromises and these difficult decisions. Fortune has not gone her way. And she's lost a lot of relationships that she's deeply cared about because of the difficulty of trying to both have her career success and her family success. And eventually she gets both. And that's good. That's happy for her. But I think the comedic, over-the-top tone of this ending implies that this is not truly an ending for Peggy. These conflicts are not something that can just be wrapped up. They cannot just disappear. One cannot pretend that they don't exist. The struggle to integrate these different parts of herself remains. Even if all of these biases and instances of discrimination that she endures instantly went away, and she was given the same opportunities as someone like Dawn, she'd still be in the position of someone like Dawn, in this existentialist state of attempting to weave together different narratives, different conceptions of the self, when the temptation, as Sartre so brilliantly emphasizes, is to cling to this single, rigidly deterministic idea of who you are. There is no guarantee that Peggy will be permanently satisfied. She will continue being petty. She will continue being a bit resentful. She is subject to a lot of racial biases common to her time. And she is quite at a distance from these more radical people, these more ardent revolutionary types. She gets involved with that set a bit in the middle seasons of the show, but she ultimately moves away from that. She is individualistic. She would absolutely be the kind of person who would say something like, "Oh, why don't they just work as hard as I did? Why are they complaining about bias or discrimination? They should just work harder." That, to a certain extent, is the kind of person Peggy is. She is focused on herself to a fault, but she is a good person. She does really take pride in her work, and she does very much want to succeed. And the show rewards her for her effort, for her determination. But these ambiguities of her character still remain, and we should not consider those ambiguities settled simply because she has a happy, satisfying resolution. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos just like this one. Take care, everyone. Keep watching Mad Men. Brilliant show. Adios, comrades.